what would you be encouraging people to do in the off season, let's call it, in order to come out giving themselves half a chance to feel free and ready to roll?
I'd be looking at the first couple of months, just building a solid base. So improving your range of motion, doing some very basic strength stuff. So just trying to add some muscle mass, trying to add some strength. And then as you get more, say, February, March time, so say we're kind of 8 weeks out from your kind of start of the season, that training might change a little bit. It might kind of morph into a little bit more speed-based stuff. We might start doing maybe slightly less reps, but slightly more explosive. We might start adding in some jumps, adding in some med ball stuff.
So welcome this week to another edition of the Halfway Hut. Chris and I have had some pretty interesting things going on this week. We'll talk about that more probably another time, because today we want to focus on talking to Jamie Greaves. Now, if you've been following him on social media, it's JG_golf fitness. You'll know exactly who I'm talking about. 22,000 followers on Instagram. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing.
Happy to be here.
So what other platforms are you on, just out of interest? Because I've highlighted your Instagram, but are you on anything else such as X, TikTok, Facebook?
Yeah, I'm basically on all social media. Yeah, to be honest, X is probably the one that most people will probably know me from. That's like my biggest platform. I engage quite a lot on there. But yeah, I am on YouTube. I'm on TikTok a little bit. But yeah, Instagram and X are probably the two that I kind of put out the most content on.
Amazing. And sort of, we've been following you for quite some time. And of course we have I suppose you could say, wouldn't go as far as say mutual friend, but certainly mutual acquaintance. No disrespect to you, Leah. We've met a few times, but he probably doesn't call us friends yet, does he, Chris? But we've had him on the podcast, and of course Brandon as well. You're part of the TGN arrangement, aren't you?
Yeah, so I've known Liam. So Liam's a good friend of mine. I've known Liam for probably like 10 years now. So back when Liam was playing on kind of Challenge Tour, DP Tour, I was his strength and conditioning coach for probably 6-7 years, and then obviously he's gone into the coaching side of things now, and he asked me to come on board to TGN alongside a couple of other people, just to branch out, I suppose, from just kind of swing stuff and give people a little bit more of an overview, I suppose, of what goes in to kind of a tour level golfer, what's kind of behind the scenes, because there's quite a lot normally in a kind of a league players team nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. And we see that with a lot of players that put stuff out, don't we, Chris, on their social media. It's not just practicing on playing golf. Obviously, it's a serious amount of work in the gym. And it's actually quite informative and opens our eyes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how would you explain the connection though from the physical fitness to making sure that you're all nice and fit and healthy to lowering your scores? Talk about a tour pro there. Obviously, to become a tour pro, you need to be able to shoot low scores. So how does the golf fitness work alongside with that?
Yeah, I think this is something that's actually kind of changed quite a lot really within probably the last 5 years or so. So yeah, golf fitness as an entity is fairly new, to be honest. So that you did have players, you have people like Gary Player, who was back in the 60s and stuff, 70s, who was way ahead of his time. But generally, the kind of golf fitness kind of revolution started late 90s, early 2000s, obviously with Tiger. But if you went back to early 2000s, you'd have Tiger and you'd have DJ in the gym. You probably wouldn't see anyone else. And then people started to kind of get into it a little bit, technology improved. We started getting like biomechanics coaches, things like force plates, and training was more along the lines of injury prevention. The golf swing puts a lot of stress on the body, especially at tour level. Tour golfers are kind of 4 or 5 times more likely to get injured than an amateur golfer. And mainly because of workload. They're hitting a lot of balls, they're traveling all over the place, they're putting a lot of stress on their body at high swing speeds as well. So training was focused around injury prevention, and it was focused around the season is a long season. It's even longer now. There's no off season at all, pretty much.
Yeah.
Can you still be fresh and still be playing good golf in, October, November time versus the start of the season? So that was kind of where training was at. And then about 5 years ago, there was a guy called Bryson who came along and started changing probably why people trained. So obviously, he basically just looked at the data, which is obviously another huge thing that's come out recently. Things like strokes gained, and basically just saw that if he managed to add 20 to 30 yards, he would take himself from, a top 20 driver of the ball to the best driver of the ball, a top 20 player to a major champion. And he thought, with if distance is so important, how do I get more distance? And he, essentially trained for speed.
Yeah.
Still with the element of the injury reduction and, because if you're going to do a lot of high volume swing speed work, you need to have a body that is physically able to cope with that. So there's been a little bit of a shift recently, but we know in the gym that if you can create high levels of force, if you've got decent levels of muscle mass, if you've got these kind of like that fast switch system, if you're able to move things quickly, um, you're able to produce more speed in your golf swing, and you're probably also more likely to be able to sustain that speed and also stay on the golf course. Not get injured and be able to practice a lot, which at the top level of golf is obviously imperative.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, how much inspiration did you take from things that Tiger Woods used to do? Obviously, Tiger Woods, he's obviously not a strength and conditioning coach, but he kind of reinvented the wheel, so to speak, in terms of golf fitness. Is that a fair assumption? I'm not a professional. I just think he was someone that came out and went, let's change the way our bodies react.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Tiger was definitely a needle mover in golf in many different aspects. Like I said, you did have people like Player. Obviously, Norman was huge on his fitness, so it had happened beforehand. But I think obviously we remember Tiger in '97 when he first burst out. Obviously at the Masters, obviously everyone knew about him from the kind of the junior US AMs anyway. Very kind of slender figure. And then by kind of 99, 2000, 2001, when he really started to dominate golf, a much more kind of muscular figure to it. And that period of golf, I mean, that 99, 2000,
Yeah.
2001, kind of early 2002, I mean, that's just certainly in my lifetime, that's the best golf anyone has ever played. I doubt anyone will kind of come close to it. And around that time, so Tiger's always had this, I think it's like a slight misconception that he was like a wild driver of the ball. Certainly back around then, he was actually one of the best drivers of the ball that's ever played the game. So I saw a stat the other day actually that there's only ever been 4 occasions where someone has averaged 20 yards longer than average on the PGA Tour and been above average in terms of fairways hit. And Tiger had 3 of those 4 seasons.
Okay.
So if you're hitting it 20 yards past average and you're hitting more fairways than your kind of peers, that's a pretty big weapon.
Okay.
So, that early 2000s Tiger, he was longer, he was straighter, he hit the ball higher. He was just better than everyone anyway. But certainly the length advantage he had, and obviously the dedication to the gym work, I think people started to kind of pay attention to it. And and I think one of his biggest rivals, obviously at the time, Mickelson. Mickelson in the early 2000s probably wasn't a particularly athletic individual, but Mickelson in his kind of 30s, 40s, 50s is a far more athletic individual. I mean, he won the PGA at what, 52, 53 years old. Tiger dragged a lot of people with him, really. Obviously, the only one probably at the time that was doing similar stuff was VJ. But a lot of the others kind of got into strength and conditioning for golf or golf fitness maybe in their 20s, 30s, whereas now you're seeing them, they're coming out and they've been, they're getting out onto tour at 22 and they've already got a decade of fitness work behind them.
Yeah, I mean, Tiger, I mean, one of his biggest rivalries, I would say, was getting injured. Was his surgeries, essentially. Do you think that possibly he went too far into the fitness thing and instead of more of the prevention, like recovery to help that?
I think Tiger made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Personally, as a strength and conditioning coach, when you read what he did,
Mm,
it wouldn't be certainly what I would be getting my tour players to do nowadays. It wasn't necessarily that anything in particular that he did was bad. It was more the accumulation of everything.
right.
And he was hitting the weights every day, running every day, playing basketball every day. He was obviously doing some Navy SEAL training later in his career, and it's the body just can't cope with all of that. It's not that any of that in on its own is bad stuff. It's just that you can't. The body only has a certain amount that kind of capacity, and if you're just hammering it like that day in day out over time, at some point the body's going to kind of have enough. So I think if Tiger had his time again, he probably would do things differently. But I also think whenever you're a needle mover and you're in a sport, you probably are going to make some errors. Like I think Bryson made some errors personally in his pursuit of speed. But because he was kind of like the first one that really went after strength training, gaining mass, a lot of speed training. Because he was the first one, he was the one that pushed the envelope. He didn't maybe know where the lines were.
Mm.
Um, and now, again, now we know a little bit more. He might have done things slightly different, but hindsight's a kind of wonderful thing on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting listening to what you're talking about there. When it comes to the players that you work with, whether they're professionals or amateur, do you treat them differently? It's a two-part question. Do you treat them differently? And secondly, is it more now about getting better or longevity of playing? Do you get people saying, I want to play like this or even
Mhm.
better than I currently play, but well into my 50s, 60s, 70s, etc., 80s even, and maybe beyond?
Yeah, I think it depends on the golfer. It depends who it is. So obviously I get a lot of kind of desk bound golfers come in and see me, a lot of senior golfers come in and see me. And yes, they would like to hit the ball further. I think we'd all like to hit the ball further. But maybe their goals are about they want to move a bit better in their golf swing. Maybe they want to be able to play golf into their 50s, 60s, 70s. Maybe they still want to be able to walk around a golf course rather than get in a cart. So their goals, their aspirations might be slightly different. And then obviously I'll get the juniors in. If I'm working with a 12-year-old, they're probably not really thinking about longevity of playing golf in their 60s and 70s. They just want to they want to bomb it. And especially if you've got an elite level golfer or an aspiring kind of golfer, speed is the number one thing that they need.
Yes.
Now, I get sometimes I get a lot of pushback on social media when I talk about this. And I always say, like, rightly or wrongly, okay, you can debate whether speed should be the number one asset that a golfer needs, okay, but at the minute it is. If
Right.
if I'm a 14, 15-year-old lad, realistically I need to be getting towards, I'd say, at least 115 club head speed, if not 120. If you're under that, it's going to be very, very, very difficult for you to get to, you know, PGA Tour, for example. Now, can it be done? Yes. Russell Henley played in the Ryder Cup. Average is 110 club head speed. Okay, so it physically can be done. If you are, Brian Harman won the Open a couple of years ago. He's like 108, 109. Like, if you are absolutely exceptional in other areas, can you spot someone 30 yards? Yeah, probably. But when everyone else is,
Mm-hmm.
when you're trying to compete against, like McIlroy, obviously, if you looked at, the final of the DP Tour that's just, been and gone, and you got McIlroy first, Pinch second, and,
Yep.
both of them are 190 to 195 ball speed. We're talking 130 club head speed out on the golf course.
Yeah.
you know, you can't afford to give that distance up to someone, because
No.
it's not like they're bad iron players and bad putters, and they're too good. You
Yeah.
can't give them 30, 40, 50-yard head
Yeah.
start every hole. There is a minimum, I would say, a minimum threshold if you're an aspiring golfer that you need to be able to get to. Now, whether that will change, obviously, I know that they're bringing the rollback rules in and stuff. Personally, I think that's going to more favour speed even more.
Yeah.
And whether because when they've tried to do this kind of curb speed in the past, they've obviously tried to do it at the US Open. The first US Open that Bryson won, that was supposed to be for your short straight hitters, and they got it so wrong that actually the longest hitter out there won it. So their attempts to kind of curb speed in the past haven't really worked. But you can't curb an athlete. And I think I've heard Bryson say that before. You can change the ball, you can change, the equipment I'm allowed to use, but you can't physically change me. If I want to be an athlete, then you can't stop that. And I think that is where golf is heading. And that's where, I get a lot of, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that I'm working with. I've got 12-year-olds that swing the driver now faster at 12 than I probably did when I was 16. I mean, it's mental.
Yeah. So where are I mean, there's levels, isn't there, in the game that we see and we admire, and whether it's a club that wins on tour and everyone else wants to go and buy it, or whether it's a social media post of, I don't know, let's say Marco Penn, for example, going through the rigors in a gym and just sort of throwing himself into these exercises. We see Fleetwood, we see Scheffler, we see McIlroy, Lowry, and etc. doing the same sort of stuff. Even Justin Rose putting stuff out there on social media. Do people come to you and say, "I've seen this on social media. What can that do for my game?"
I think there's a lot more of that out there now. I think the understanding is getting better. Again, golf fitness is a pretty new kind of concept, and I think it's gone in waves. I think when it first came out, there was a lot of, I'd probably almost use the term glorified rehab. It was a lot of a lot of band work, a lot of body weight stuff, a lot of stretches. Again, all of which can have their place. Whereas now there's been this shift towards a lot more jumps, a lot more hops, general athleticism, throwing balls around, golfers not being afraid to shift some heavy weights. Again, I think a lot of golfers have this misconception that strength training, if I do some bench pressing, for example, I'm going to get stiff as a board through my chest and shoulders, and suddenly I won't be able to make a turn in my backswing. That I've heard that kind of stuff quite a lot. It doesn't ring true. Strength training actually, when it's done properly, improves people's range of motion, and it offers a lot of benefits to the ability to produce force in your golf swing. So I think the information is getting better. People are becoming more aware of it. And I'd also say people are starting to think, actually, this could help me. I think back to my journey when I started this 10 years ago. My client base would have been basically aspiring juniors, county kind of golfers up, county and national, and then tour players. Whereas now I work with quite a few, just regular club golfers, people that play, work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and play 18 on a Saturday. And they see the benefit to actually, I can hit the ball a bit further, I can lower my handicap, and I can feel better on and off the golf course. So it's gone through this cycle where it used to be seen as for just kind of like the elite players, but actually you probably a more regular club golfer can get just as much benefit, if not more benefit.
Yeah, I mean, is it something? I mean, you could touch on your app that you've got as well. Is it something that you need a gym membership for to get these gains, or can we do these workouts at home? Can it be a thing where I've got 15 minutes this evening, I need to do a good workout? Do I need to go to the gym, or can I do these things at home?
Yeah, exactly. There's this huge misconception, I think, amongst golfers that even the ones that kind of follow me on social media and they come in to see me and they think I'm going to give them this kind of like 4 or 5 gym sessions that are 90 minutes, 2 hours long per time, and it just doesn't need to be that. For we all have lives. We're all busy, and for most people, if you could probably dedicate 2 to 3 hours total per week, for most people that can be game changing and life changing. I bang on all the time on social media about the power of 10 minutes a day. So 10 minutes a day or something equates to over an hour a week. It equates to over 5 hours a month, and it equates to over 60 hours a year.
Yeah.
If you can spend 10 minutes a day doing, say, some mobility stuff at home, so you don't need any kit to be able to do mobility from home. If even now, in the UK here, we're probably looking at what, 4 months really before,
Yeah.
sadly, before kind of spring comes around and we start
Yeah.
getting some decent weather.
Yeah.
So if you'd spent 10 minutes a day from now over the next 4 months, you're going to put 20 hours of mobility training in the bag. I'm pretty sure you're going to be moving and feeling a bit better in your golf swing
Wow.
when next season comes around.
Wow.
10 minutes a day from home. And then obviously alongside that, I'd probably look for maybe 2 to 3 strength sessions a week.
Okay.
And when I say strength sessions a week, that could be in the gym or it could be at home. Whatever works, whatever fits in for people. But, 3 20-minute strength sessions at home, for example, and 10 minutes daily mobility, just over 2 hours a
Yeah.
week, all from home. And it's also not that unachievable for people. I think so often, and I actually think for this, golf is a great analogy. If you're a 28 handicapper, you don't try and go from 28 to scratch overnight. Any golf coach will just laugh at you. That's not realistic. Okay, so if you're someone that doesn't really engage in fitness work, don't try and go you're like a 28 handicap. Don't try and go to the gym 5 days a week for
Mhm.
90 minutes and, start small, make it sustainable. See if you can commit to 10 minutes daily mobility, make it a habit,
Yeah.
then see if you can maybe, bring in 1 or 2 20-minute strength sessions a week. And I find that kind of approach for people works a lot better. And I've actually had a lot of golfers, both in person and actually on my app, who have started like that. They've started with, say, 10 minutes daily mobility. On my app, I've got a 2-day at home plan, which is
Okay.
like, 2-day at home,
Yeah.
2 days a week. Like, it's
Yeah.
really like, it doesn't require a huge amount of effort. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
And then they'll do that. And then suddenly they enjoy it. They start seeing some benefits. They start feeling better. And they'll go, actually, I'm going to go out and maybe I'm going to go and buy a few pieces of kit now. I'm still going to train at home, but I'm going to invest in a few dumbbells and a ball and stuff. Or maybe they go, I really enjoy this. I'm doing 2 sessions a week at home, and they'll message me. Would I get more benefit if I did 3 gym sessions a week?
Yeah.
That, once people notice the difference, it's amazing how they will actually start to almost do more by themselves versus if you try and set someone 5 gym sessions a week, they're probably going to do none. So start small and kind of gradually build.
Yeah, yeah. And with those workouts that we can do at home, what about the recovery side of things or the prevention side of things? What are the proper ways to possibly stop yourself from getting injured? So if we go in and start doing all these strength training and everything, if we just go and start lifting stuff and then we go and play golf, yeah, we might see the benefits, but that can also bring injuries into play if we don't stretch properly or stuff like that, isn't there? So what are some of the ways that can help us with that as well?
So the main injuries from, say, engaging in fitness come from trying to do too much too soon. Okay, so you've got to what we call progressively overload. Okay, so if you have never done any training before, you wouldn't walk into the gym and pick up the 20-kilo dumbbells and start trying to rep them out. Okay, you'd start small and then you slowly kind of build from there. And I think that's key for people. I almost like, especially when I first start working with someone or they first start a program on my app, I almost like them to feel like they've left something in the tank. Like I don't want them feeling like they've worked at like a 10 out of 10. I quite like people to work at like a 7 out of 10, especially if I'm on something new. Give yourself time to adapt, and then over time you can start to add a bit more weight or a few more reps, things like that. um I think that the too much too soon is where a lot of injuries, certainly from a fitness point of view, come from. From a golf point of view, most injuries, up to 90% of golf injuries, are overuse related. Okay.
Right.
And strength training has actually been shown to half that risk.
Yeah.
It's why I mentioned earlier that tour players are far more likely to get injured than your amateur golfers,
Okay.
because they're basically their workload is so much higher. So kind of at tour level, I might have people tracking how many swings they're making each week, particularly if they're, say, rehabbing or coming back from an injury. Most people don't probably need to go into quite that detail, but it is certainly worth thinking about. So we call like it a spike in workload. So if you're someone that, say, you normally play 18 holes once a week and you go to the range for an hour, you say hit 60 balls on the range, okay? And then suddenly you have a week off and you start playing 36 holes of golf
Hmm.
for 4 straight days, your body is probably going to feel terrible and you might actually pick up a couple of niggles. We saw that quite a bit when we came out of COVID, for example. So the second lockdown we had here in the UK was, I think it was like January to March. No one was really doing much golf. And then suddenly we were allowed to go back onto golf courses. And
Yeah.
actually the first couple of weeks, the weather was like stunning over
Yeah.
here, which is
It was.
unusual. And people just went nuts. So if you tracked your weekly swing kind of volume on a graph, it'd have been 0, 0, 0, 0, and then suddenly it was like 400.
Mhm.
And the amount of people that were complaining of wrist injuries, back injuries, shoulder injuries, that kind of thing. So in terms of golf and overuse injuries, you want to get yourself stronger so that your body can cope with more. And then you kind of just want to think a little bit about your workload and just trying to not spike it too much. Now, for most people, that's probably not going to happen, but certainly for like tour level golfers or say a junior that's just about to come into 6 week school holidays, um, just being aware of that.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense as well. I mean, when it comes to, let's talk about your app a little bit more, because you're not the first and you certainly won't be the last to put something like this together. How do you sort of make it bespoke? Is there a two-way conversation that could be had? Is there support? Obviously there's off the shelf stuff that you can get, but I think as golfers, we've certainly found that meeting someone, seeing someone, having that interaction, even if it's over a Skype call or something like that, can have tremendous benefits as opposed to just picking something off the shelf. How does that element work within the app?
Yes. So the app has got, the app's got loads on it, but it's got 5 different strength and power programs. So
Okay.
2 can be done from home, 3 can be done in the gym. So it ranges from, like I say, the intro one was a 2-day at home, and then the advanced one is a 4-day gym kind of split. Now they're all 12-week programs based around that kind of building in terms of building intensity, but also building in terms of exercise kind of complexity.
Right.
So you can kind of pick the workout or the plan most relevant to you. Because absolutely, someone say that wants to do a bit of training from home and can commit twice a week. An advanced gym plan that's just pointless for them.
Sure.
And actually, it's probably going to make them worse because they're not ready for that kind of training. There's mobility, there's self-assessment tools on the app, so you can actually go through a full mobility self-assessment, doing very simple tests to
Okay.
identify if there's any kind of areas that you need to work on. So you can personalize your kind of mobility based around the self-assessments, and there's also power self-assessments as well. So you can see if are you stronger through your left leg and your right leg? Are you power deficient through maybe lower body than upper body?
Okay.
So there's a lot of these kind of things that come into play actually, because generally speaking, a lot of golfers that I see are very trail side dominant. So in terms of for example, I normally do a hopping test between right and left foot. And the amount of right-handed golfers that are terrible at kind of jumping out of their left leg is quite high. Yeah, if you look at most golf coaches and you look at what's being taught now in golf about kind of pushing down into lead toe and driving out of it, most ground forces happen through lead leg. Yet most golfers are terrible out of their lead leg. So there's this kind of um, this kind of thing that if you can be aware of that as a golfer, I'd describe that as like a power leap, which most golfers are probably not aware of. When I do jumps and hops with people, they're like, "Oh, I haven't done this since I was like 16 in school."
Mhm.
We stop jumping, we stop hopping, like they're athletic activities, and we stop doing them. But if which is why I kind of, again, a lot of what like Liam talks about, because a lot of what Liam does in the Tour Golf Network is he does a lot of lead side stuff. He gets people hitting like balls left hand only,
Yeah.
things like that. And because I think where me and him are very aligned on this is that he sees it in the golf swing where a lot of people lack this kind of lead side ability, and I see very similar things in the gym. Like people are very trail side kind of power, and they don't really have anything through their lead side. They're not able to apply force, but then also not able to brake. So our lead foot, we kind of post up off it. So it acts as a bit of a braking system as well. And people are they're not good at it. They do the tests, they find out they're not good at it, and then obviously they can start to train it. Which is where those kind of self-assessments are they're really handy to do, so that you know where you're good, and you know kind of what you need to be working on.
So if someone is out there now thinking it's cold, I mean, it depends where in the world they're listening to this particular podcast. If it's in South Africa, they're loving life at the moment, but it's pretty cold and bleak in Europe mainly. And as we've just said, 3-4 months but before people start to think about getting back out onto the golf course. April 1st is obviously a usual, big golfing season starts. What would you be encouraging people to do in the off season, let's call it, in order to come out, giving themselves half a chance to feel free and ready to roll?
So I think I'd almost view it as like a bit of a pyramid, or almost like laying the I'd say the next couple of months I almost talk about like laying the foundations. A lot of golfers rush to the speed drills. They rush to the med balls and stuff. And now that stuff is great, don't get me wrong, but I describe it as like icing on the cake kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I would describe quite often, if I'm like what we call periodizing a kind of off season for a golfer, I'd be looking at the first couple of months just building a solid base. So
Okay.
improving your range of motion, doing some very basic strength stuff. So just trying to add some muscle mass, trying to add some strength. And then as you get more, say, February, March time, so say we're kind of 8 weeks out from your kind of start of the season, that training might change a little bit. It might kind of morph into a little bit more speed based stuff. We might start doing maybe slightly less reps, but slightly more explosive. We might start adding in some jumps, adding in some med ball stuff. This is where you might start using maybe more of the swing speed, if you've got, the speed sticks, things like that. Because you've already laid the foundation. Your body's moving pretty good. You've improved kind of strength. You've improved tissue tolerance. So your body can cope with this. So that's kind of the general structure of an off season. You want to build the base first, and then you can start to add the explosiveness, add the speed, add maybe some of the like golf specific stuff that everyone loves. So,
Mhm.
if you put a golf specific drill on Instagram, it goes mad. If you put a basic, someone doing a really well executed deadlift, doesn't do as well. But
Sure.
actually, the deadlift should be the more pressing exercise for a golfer. And then,
Mhm.
like I say, that fancy med ball drill is probably more of an icing on the cake thing. It's a snippet of what the golfer needs.
Interesting. And how about pre-round warm-ups? Not a lot do that. They might grab 3 clubs, to give some weight to the swing. Um, do you think that is important before a round to help you not just prevent injury over 18 holes, or maybe more if you're playing 36 in a day, but also to ensure that you go the distance without the lower back or the legs or whatever starting to be affected? Do you think that that's something that should be factored in every single time you play golf?
Yeah. And not just every time you play golf, every time you hit balls.
Okay.
Is one of the things that I really try and stress to, say, my juniors. Just like develop this habit. And when I talk about warming up before you play golf, it is more of a warm up and not a stretch session. I think golfers sometimes fall into a stretch session.
Yeah.
So Can some mobility be a part of it? Yes, absolutely. But we want to make sure that our body is prepared to perform.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of bands, like resistance bands. Get a
Yeah.
band, keep it in your golf bag.
Yeah.
Do some resistance based exercises, which will not only improve some mobility, but start to kind of get some of the muscles, get the nervous system fired up a little bit.
Okay.
And amongst kind of tour players, I'd actually have them go through like a little mini gym session. I call it a priming session. So it might be 20-minute gym session with kind of 5 to 10 minutes of band and dynamic kind of warm up. They might pick one maybe compound exercise where they do actual like a proper lift, but at like a reasonable load, but with like a high level of speed. So, like a great one now would be like a trap bar deadlift. They load it up at a reasonable level, but really try and move it fast. They do a few kind of throws of a med ball, a few jumps, 20 minutes, done. Very low volume, but trying to think about firing the body up and preparing not just the muscular system, but also the nervous system to prepare to perform. Because you're basically swinging a stick from 0 to in excess of 100 mile an hour
Yeah.
again, and then back down to 0.
Yeah.
So doing a few kind of static stretches, not really going to prepare your body for that. So it's something that I like people to do. It needs to be a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more resistance based, because probably 90% of golfers don't warm up. Like most, if you see someone if you're at your golf club on a Saturday morning and you see someone on the putting green going through some band mobilizations and some jumps, I guarantee whoever's in the bar is going to be coming out and having a little bit of a laugh. Golf warming up as a golfer's still got this like stigma attached to it, which I find very strange, because most golfers don't like playing bad golf. Okay. There's plenty of golfers that, if they're
Yeah.
having a bad round, they really don't enjoy it. And I would certainly class myself in that bracket.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you do something that takes 5 minutes to give yourself a slightly better chance of playing well? The data on where golfers drop shots is pretty clear. The first hole for most people is not a good hole. If you look at, all the things like Arcos that do all the data now, you can see for a lot of people, the first few holes, they tend to score a little bit higher, and the last few holes, they get to score a bit higher. Now, the first few are because they're not prepared, and the last few are probably because haven't eaten anything the whole way around, or they've took a water bottle out with them and they haven't drunk anything from it, and
Yeah.
they basically hit a wall. They run out of energy.
Yeah.
So what I always stress to people is golf is a hard game. Anyone that's played it, no matter what level of golf you've played, it is a hard game, and it basically kicks you when you're down. You stand there on the first, you flag an iron shot in there, it's all over it. It gets a slight gust of wind and it's plugged under the front lip of a bunker, and you walk off with double. Like, there's plenty in golf that we can't control, but are we prepared when we step on the first tee? And have we prepared so that we can play the last 4 or 5 holes well, because we're fit and we've eaten and drank enough whilst we're on the way round?
Sure.
They're like 2 really easy things that anyone can do, no matter what level of golfing you can do. To me, there's no excuse for those 2 things. Now, do they guarantee that you're going to play good golf? No, if only it was that easy. But they stack the odds a little bit more in your favor, which in a game of very small margins, I think is, a worthwhile investment.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've said it a lot before, haven't we, about our pre-round, keeping ourselves going.
Yeah.
Nutrition side of things is definitely underestimated and not talked about enough. And it forms a package, doesn't it?
Mm.
But you're right with what you said there about the warm up. Every time you play, especially if you go to a driving range, especially this time of year, you're cold, aren't you? You are literally cold. Your muscles are cold. There's,
Yeah.
you need to get yourself golf ready, because the last thing you want, and that can be so easily done, is pull a muscle.
Yeah, and it's so common to just hop out the car and go straight to the first tee, play terrible, and think, why did I play terrible? Why am I now hurting after the round
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah.
Well, that's why.
So Jamie, where are you in the world? Where can people find you?
So yeah, I'm obviously I'm on social media, so I'm on pretty much any social media at JG Golf Fitness.
Yeah.
I have a website as well, jggolffitness.co.uk. I actually have quite a few ebooks that are
Okay.
completely free to download on there as well,
Amazing.
including a warm up one, and including a what I call a kind of fuel for performance ebook,
Yeah.
fuel for the fairways. So what I've just talked about, if people want to go to my website, they can download both of them for free, and it kind of tells you exactly how to warm up and exactly what to eat and drink on a golf course. And just follow that, and then hopefully at least you got those two things taken care of.
Amazing, amazing. And we'll put all those links, won't we, down in the show
Yeah,
notes. We'll
absolutely.
continue to share and hopefully collaborate with some of the bits and pieces that have come out of this episode. There's some real gold there, some real nuggets, which
Absolute
people
gems, yeah.
need, of all ages, young and old, because especially if you've got some aspiring, juniors and aspiring pros. It's interesting what you were saying earlier about getting their speed up early, and then you've got the other spectrum of those that want to have longevity in their game of golf, injury free, within reason. It's such a massive part of the game, because we all want to hit the ball further, but sometimes we can do ourselves an injustice, can't we, by going after one a bit too much if we're not match ready or body ready, so to speak. Jamie, thank you so much for your time. I've really appreciated this one.
No problem at all. Enjoyed it.
And I think we're going to talk off air, shall we say, about some specifics. Certainly in my game, I don't know if I can twist Chris's arm to look at fitness. But for our listeners, we'll perhaps put a little code together that we can talk about a little later and put something out. So if anyone wants to get on board, you can follow our journey, or my journey, shall we say, and hopefully see how fitness is helping myself with winter practice. And with regards to anyone that wants to get involved, we'll put the links down below and perhaps some codes for you to get on board and look after yourself so that you can come out April 1st or wherever you are in the world, actually, just fighting fit. All good?
Perfect, yeah.
Nice one. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks.